Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight now, and we're joining you out here on the press lawn as NASA and SpaceX are preparing to launch SpaceX's 31st commercial resupply services mission to the International Space Station. You can see an image just to my left-hand side of the rocket standing there live at Launch Complex 39A, getting ready to launch that booster and the Dragon spacecraft on top for a fifth time. Let's go ahead and bring you full frame out to the rocket there at the pad. Stephen, you can adjust that right there. Appreciate that. We're currently T-minus 1 hour, 28 minutes, 28 seconds to the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket, sending more than 6,000 pounds of science and supplies to some very eager astronauts awaiting its arrival at the space station tomorrow morning at 10:15 a.m. And of course, we have the whole cadre of crew out here supporting this mission. Our Stephen Young running the technical operations of the broadcast. Adam is running the cameras right now, and we've got our friends Pete, Chuck, and Jen in the mix as well. We're going to go to member comments a little bit later on when we come back in just a few minutes or so. But right now, I want to introduce a very special guest as we're getting our broadcast started. I'm joined right now by the Deputy Chief Scientist for the International Space Station program with NASA, Megan Everett, who is kind enough to join us as this mission is just less than an hour and a half away from launching.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here and help you guys out with some science facts.
Yeah, absolutely. As we were just teeing up, this is the 31st time that SpaceX is sending science and supplies to the ISS. So we'll start high level and then dig a little bit more into the science itself. But once the Dragon actually arrives at the station, what's the process of unpacking? What's the crew going to be seeing when they open the hatch of the Dragon capsule?
Right. So one of the things that we do is spend a lot of time figuring out the logistics of how we get the science unloaded and ready to start. So we have some science that we need to get out of the vehicle early. A lot of that is in cold stowage or powered lockers. So we have to get that out and get that set up inside of the space station so that science can start as soon as possible. Some of our science has to run for the full 30 days of the mission, so we want to get that going and then get it sent back in time so we can complete that. Other science is some cells that are kind of being kept alive on power, so we want to make sure that those cells make it to the investigation that's going to be done on the space station.
And you mentioned, obviously, there's a lot of time considerations when it comes to, what needs to come off first. We'll skip ahead almost to the end of the mission, then we'll come back to the good stuff in the middle. But when you think about scheduling what needs to come back to Earth and when, I guess, how does that organization get structured when you're thinking of, what's kind of done, what you need to make space for the return trip to make space for the new science?
Yeah, so prior to the part of the vehicle, we have it very well choreographed and laid out. So some of the science returns in cold stowage or even frozen, and it's frozen at all different temperatures. So we have our different cold stowage assets are set at those different temperatures. So each of the science will be preconditioned for anywhere from 24, 48, 72 hours, and then it'll be put in the asset that will be put in the Dragon to return back to the Earth. So the ones that are cold stowage assets, we try to get those in as late as possible before undock, sometimes just a few hours before.
And one of the science experiments, or I guess a technology demonstration really that kind of caught my attention that you were discussing earlier today is a little smaller than a shoebox size little computer that's going to be testing how to respond to micrometeorite strikes, right? Can you talk about that experiment a little bit more? From Voyager Space, the little sort of magenta cube that's got the artwork on the side of it. That's okay.
I'm
we can.
Quite sure which one
we'll talk with Pat O'Neill about that. That's quite all right.
Sorry about that. I don't know the
No,
artwork.
that's okay. One of the ones that you did delve into a little bit earlier today, though, in the trunk of the Dragon, the Codex experiment, which is going to be studying solar winds. Can you talk about where that's going to be stationed on the ISS and the importance of it?
Yeah, so that'll be located on the external platform of the ISS, and this Codex experiment will measure the solar winds, like you said. And so solar winds come out of the sun's surface at like 1,000,000 miles an hour at temperatures 1,000,000 degrees hotter than the sun's surface. So you can think of these as these very violent storms. And so these are obviously very hard to measure, because really one of the few places you can measure them is from an external platform on the International Space Station. So we'll be collecting measurements from that, and hopefully it'll help us better predict space weather. So all of the great auroras and all of the lights that we've been seeing right now on the poles are due to these solar flares. And so hopefully that'll help us understand that better, but then it also can negatively impact some satellites or even power systems here on Earth. So better understanding that weather will have great impacts for us here, as well as space weather.
And obviously there's a lot of science experiments that are going to be happening over the course of the time that these experiments are on station. I guess what's one that maybe sticks out in your mind that you're especially excited to see, whether it's the astronauts that are going to be particularly hands-on with, or just one that you're looking forward to seeing the outcome from?
That's always the hardest question. I love all of the science that we're flying. So there's a couple on this mission that I'll talk about two of them. One is called Artemis, and this is looking at moss from Antarctica, and it's very kind of sturdy, rugged moss. So it can survive these very harsh environments. And what we want to do is look at how this moss can help with bioregenerative life support systems, and how it responds and lives through the very harsh environments of space. So we'll be looking at that and how it grows on the space station. So that will be a really cool experiment, and will definitely be very influential in hardware development and life support systems as we look at exploring beyond low Earth orbit to the moon and to Mars. Another very cool one is cold welding that we're doing, and this one, it's looking at, so for those of you that don't know, cold welding is when things smash together really, really hard and the metal bonds together. So we'll be looking at copper and aluminum, and we'll look at how these materials can adhere together. And the idea is that we would be able to use this type of technology to potentially fix cracks in the space station, or if there's meteorite damage or something like that. So this is a really great tech demo. It's never been done before. There will be video of capturing this live, so I'm really excited to see what this looks like. And then that will actually be released to the public after the mission, so everyone can tie along and see what that looks like too. And then the metals will be returned to Earth and kind of analyzed for how sturdy they are compared to the ground-based models.
Which I think, to my foible earlier, that was actually the experiment that I was trying to conjure up for you. So I'll take the mistake on that for not being clear on my question. Well, I know your time is very short, but I guess just lastly, as NASA and its commercial partners and international partners around the world continue to launch the science and learn more, I guess what are some of the maybe milestones or things that you're looking forward to in the future that you can only advance in the space station, that as the ISS unfortunately approaches its final years on orbit, that you're looking forward to in the future?
That is a really cool question, because I think as we look forward to the future, a few things as we transition to kind of this commercial era of spaceflight and low Earth orbit, one of the things we're looking at is in-space manufacturing. And a lot of the things that we're going to do on the space station will be super influential in cancer curing and diseases here on Earth. So we already have a great variety of science on the space station that's been done to target curing cancer on Earth and helping this White House initiative called Cancer Moonshot. We also have a lot of work being done on semiconductor manufacturing, which is an amazing achievement to be able to at least manufacture part of the semiconductors in space and return those to Earth and be able to kind of help those communication pathways. That'll be beneficial to Earth, as well as when we start looking at going to the moon and outside low Earth orbit, and we need to establish better communication pathways than we have now. So in addition to that, I think really just figuring out how humans are going to survive longer in low Earth orbit and on the moon and on Mars. So a lot of the work that we're doing in plant work and human health and performance will really kind of put this whole picture together and tell the story of everything that we need to explore further and go places we've never gone before. We really need ISS to be instrumental in doing that.
ISS, and then what comes next?
After ISS, well, there'll be a commercial platform in low Earth orbit, and then our whole Artemis program is going to get us back to the moon. So we're really excited about all of those upcoming missions and being a part of those.
Megan Everett, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. Go launch.
Exactly. And so we are now an hour and 19 minutes away from that launch. Much more coverage coming up ahead, including some additional live interviews. So don't go anywhere. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of CRS-31 to the International Space Station. We'll be back with more commentary in just a moment. And our thanks again to Megan Everett, again the Deputy Chief Scientist for NASA's International Space Station program. Time is currently T-minus 1 hour, 15 minutes, 57 seconds, and counting. As you're getting settled in on this Monday evening, appreciate the more than 1,600 of you who are joining with us live, getting things rolling. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by hitting the like button, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we prepare to see this Falcon fly. Weather at this point is still about 70% favorable from the latest update we've been told. So conditions only looking at a 30% chance of possibility for violating weather conditions at launch. Of course, this is a mission to the International Space Station, so it is an instantaneous launch opportunity today. Countdown clock is counting down to 9:29 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 02:29 UTC for our friends joining around the world. 45th Weather Squadron tracking the cumulus clouds, liftoff winds, and the risk of flight through precipitation as the potential watch items today coming into this launch opportunity. If for whatever reason there's a technical snafu and they need to pivot beyond today, the 24-hour backup is not their friend. The conditions deteriorate to just a 40% chance of favorable weather. Taking a look at the radar view here, you see the weather down in the area of the Caribbean is creating some concern for booster recovery weather for last night's Starlink mission. However, it was a helium issue on the ground side that actually called the ball game for SpaceX. Taking a look at the clouds here. SpaceX did clarify, though, during a briefing with the press earlier today that the helium issue was a ground side issue and did not have an impact on pad 39A, where this Falcon 9 launching CRS-31 is going to be lifting off from. Of course, as soon as we have additional information to pass along about the next launch opportunity for the Starlink mission, we'll go ahead and share that with you. It's a camera view of Space Launch Complex 40 live right now. Falcon 9 still upright as SpaceX is working through that helium issue, and will get moving with this launch as soon as they're able. Obviously on the other side of CRS-31. NASA and SpaceX have a 24-hour stand-down agreement during which SpaceX will not launch another Falcon 9 rocket 24 hours or less before a NASA mission, which is why Starlink 6-77 is now punted to the other side of this flight. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank Jeff Hansen, one of our channel members, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Jeff. Getting us off on a good note here, who says, Godspeed, Dragon. Clistia Lee gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Clistia. To our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Clistia in the live chat if you haven't already. I hope you stick around with channel membership. Speaking of Calistia, I want to thank all of our moderators who are joining with us tonight. I see Aussie Space Girl is also with us this evening, and we'll keep an eye out for any of the other mods who happen to pop up tonight. If you do see them stop by, be sure to give them a big old hello. Also want to thank Cumulus Granatus for a $2 Canadian super chat. Says, going to be an exciting evening. We certainly hope so. Of course, weather permitting. Now T-minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. As we are tracking weather conditions, we are also looking at a strong wind warning affecting the Cape of winds of 35 knots, potentially up to 50 knots. As you can see, the American flag at the countdown, or the press site, blowing quite swiftly there, just to the left of the countdown clock. So nice little visual indication of conditions out here. It's been off and on sprinkling throughout the course of the afternoon, hence the 45th Weather Squadron's note for flight through precipitation. However, within the last, I'd say, hour or so, we really haven't noticed much, if any, rain. So that's certainly been a good improvement as the evening has progressed. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, in now just a hair under 9 minutes, we're going to be joined by our next live guest. That will be Lisa Carnell. She is the director of NASA's Biological and Physical Sciences Division, based at NASA HQ within the Science Mission Directorate. So we'll be talking more about some of the biological science flying up to the International Space Station. Got a little hint of it with Megan Everett teasing out the Artemis experiment, and not, of course, to NASA's Artemis program flying to the moon. Now currently T-minus 1 hour, 7 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. We will go through the countdown timeline on the other side of our interview. But since we talked about the Codex experiment that's going to be launching to the station, I wanted to give you a visual idea of what exactly we were talking about. This image here, this is the Codex, which, for those who follow space program, you'll not be overly stunned to know that Codex is not just a name, but it is in fact an acronym. It stands for Coronal Diagnostic Experiment. This is the solar coronagraph that Megan was talking about. It'll be, well, it's currently inside the trunk of SpaceX's Cargo Dragon spacecraft. Once it's docked to the International Space Station, NASA will use the Canadarm2 to remove the Codex from the trunk, and it'll be mounted onto the Express Logistics Carrier 3 on the ISS. It'll be on the space-facing side of the station. Those who recall the recent launch of the GOES West satellite, formerly GOES 19, that also featured a coronagraph, and in a similar fashion, the information gathered from this coronagraph will be shared broadly with the public on a public-facing website for the community to use. We also briefly talked about the cold welding experiment called the Nanolab Astrobeat. This is an image of what that looks like. And in my infinite wisdom, thinking about the quote-unquote artwork, which is not so much artwork as much as it was some signatures on the side of the computer there. You can see on the right-hand side of this image. Now currently T-minus 1 hour, 4 minutes, 36 seconds and counting. We're now T-minus 1 hour, 2 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. We're just making final preparations for the start of our next conversation. See a little venting there at the pad, a little bit of vapor. SpaceX, of course, won't start fueling the rocket until that clock hits T-minus 35 minutes and counting, and that's assuming the go-ahead is given from the SpaceX launch director to begin fueling the Falcon 9 rocket. Currently T-minus 59 minutes, 13 seconds and counting, less than an hour away to the planned launch of the CRS-31 mission. For those of you just joining us, as we're now at the bottom of the hour, I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live launch coverage of the 31st Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-31 mission to the station. As you can see, it is a bit of a blustery night here at the Kennedy Space Center as Falcon 9 rocket preparing to launch this booster for a 5th time. The Dragon up top, C208, also launching for a 5th time as well. For our channel members who are settling in, a welcome to all of you. If you are not a channel member, now is a great time to do so, as channel membership comes with a number of perks, including access to member-only videos here on YouTube, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments in 4K from the Cape, and discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. And I say tonight's a good night for that. Well, any night's a good night to become part of our channel member community, but especially tonight since we've just added the mission patch, the embroidered mission patch for CRS-31 to our online store. Here's an image of what that mission patch looks like. So again, you can find this at our online shop right now. That is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Members get a bit of a discount on this and all shop purchases. And as promised, we're coming up on our next live interview in just a moment or two. We're going to be joined by Dr. Lisa Carnell, who is the Director of NASA's Biological and Physical Sciences Division within the Science Mission Directorate. Enjoy some views of the pad, and we'll be right back with that live interview.
MD, this is LD on countdown 1, pulling Dragon readiness to proceed with propellant load.
Dragon is go to proceed with propellant load.
Copy.
and welcome back to our live coverage of the CRS-31 mission, the latest cargo supply mission heading up to the International Space Station. As you can see, I am not alone out here on the press lawn. We've got the countdown clock behind us, just about 51 and a half minutes, and Dr. Lisa Carnell is now joining us, who is the head of the Biological and Physical Sciences Division within the Science Mission Directorate. Lisa, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And we were talking a little bit off camera about, all the science that within your division is heading up to the station. 6 experiments in total. I guess we could really start with any one of them, but choosing among children, perhaps, is there one that kind of, especially piques your interest as, really excited to see this one fly?
So, oh my gosh, I mean, that is like one of the most challenging questions that you could ask. Like you said, how do you pick your favorite child? So I'm going to tell you that right now, particularly in this launch, they're all my favorites because they literally are spanning the entire division. If you understand the breadth of our portfolio, we do physical sciences and biological sciences. We have quantum physics going up. We have flames that we're studying in space for to keep the astronauts safe. We have biological experiments looking at inflammation and blood clots, and we're growing plants and then looking at the impact of gravity and microgravity on radiation, and combined looking at moss. So, I mean, you can't ask for a more diverse portfolio of science from our division going up in this one single launch.
Well, I think that's actually a good place to start with the Artemis experiment,
Yeah.
since Megan Everett did mention that in our previous conversation. So we know that this is moss that grows in Antarctica, that it's generally speaking pretty resistant to radiation, but you want to look at the combination of that with microgravity, right? What is that combination expected to tell us?
So it's really fascinating because when you look at things that are growing in these extreme environments, you wonder, like, why? What is it about that environment that's giving them some sort of advantage so that they can be resistant to, in this case, the radiation or the other extremes that it's exposed to? And so when we send it to the space station, we can look at the effect of microgravity. We're also analyzing it on the ground too, so we can make that comparison between the ground-based version and that in the microgravity environment to see how does it repair. So does it repair and regenerate? What are some of those key takeaways and underlying mechanisms that we can learn?
And the fire suppression, can you delve a little bit more into that? Obviously, when you think flames in space, it makes some people's ears perk up. But, what is this really sort of hinging on? And maybe in what ways is this different from other fire-related experiments that have been done previously?
Yeah, so this one is interesting. We have done so many fire-related experiments in space, which, as you can imagine, is absolutely critical and a little bit frightening, right, if you're going to be doing a combustion experiment in the space environment. But it's really important, especially as NASA is looking into its future for Artemis, sustainable presence on the lunar surface, and then going out to Mars. We need to make sure that we have an environment that keeps the astronauts safe. So right now we have SOFIE MIST that's going to be the next in a series of these different types of experiments. And SOFIE MIST stands for Solid Fuel Ignition and Suppression. So SOFIE is designed to look at what does it take, how long does it take to ignite and burn a particular material in space, and then can we suppress it in ways that we would normally do conventionally? Because flames do not behave the same in the space environment as they do on the ground.
And obviously that particular experiment kind of lends itself most directly to an on-orbit application or potentially a deep space mission. But, for those of us, the vast majority of us who unfortunately will never be lucky enough to go into space, what do you think among the suite of 6 experiments that's flying may have the most direct on-Earth application, in addition to obviously what's going on in microgravity and deep space?
Yeah, so the first one that comes to mind, and I'll be honest, I think there is so much benefit for all of the science that we do on the space station, but the first one that comes to mind to your question is the megakaryocytes. Really taking a look at what's happening with blood clotting and inflammation, and that's coming from the bone marrow and the bone marrow megakaryocytes and the platelets and the way they're formed and the function of those in the microgravity environment. we can look at those to protect the astronauts, but then also how do we translate that information on Earth? And can I give one more plug out there to Gears?
Please, yeah.
I know we talked about Gears last January, right? The first launch of that. We're looking at antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the space environment. Imagine how that could benefit here on Earth with all the antibiotic-resistant bacteria that we have right here on Earth. So much translational benefit.
And I know obviously your time is short. There's lots to prepare before the mission goes. I guess my last question will be, thinking about what's coming back from the space station, once this Dragon undocks, and obviously we'll bring some cargo with it. Is there anything that's offloading from ISS that's specifically going to BPS?
Oh, we have so much that's offloading. My goodness, I actually can't even recall the entire laundry list of science investigations that are coming back. So some of these experiments will be coming back as well so that we can bring them in. They'll be doing a lot of the ground-based analysis from many of these experiments that are launching today, and we'll be able to actually provide those results over the next year to the science community and the public.
Lisa, thank you so much for spending some time with us and educating our audience on the science flying, and we're excited to see the experiments go. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and thank you for letting us talk about all the great research we're doing in BPS.
Oh, before I let you go, you did want to bring up your support for the Codex work in the heliophysics department.
Absolutely. So being part of the Science Mission Directorate, it would be remiss of me to not give a plug for my heliophysics director colleague, Joe Westlake, who couldn't be with us tonight. But they have Codex flying as well up to space station, and that mission is focusing on a coronagraph, which is pretty cool. It's a partner between NASA, CASI, and INAF. And they're going to be looking at, what's happening with the corona. And some of you might be saying, why do I care about that? So that solar wind that they're looking at is what's giving you all of those beautiful auroras, and they give you all of those power grid outages and impact to satellites. So stay tuned for more on that.
Sun giveth, the sun taketh away.
That's right. It's going to be incredible, the results that they get from that.
Looking forward to that. I think it's about a 6 month or so time on station. So a lot of good readings coming from that one as well.
Absolutely.
Well, Lisa,
Absolutely.
thank you so much for taking the time. And of course, we've got a lot more science and Falcon readiness items to talk about as we continue on through the count. Currently T-minus 44 minutes, 17 seconds. So we're just about 6 or so minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on if they're ready to start propellant load. The Dragon team gave their thumbs up. We'll see how this night progresses. Don't go anywhere. Much more coverage right around the corner. Currently T-minus 42 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. Our thanks again to Dr. Lisa Cornell, the director of the Biological and Physical Sciences Division within the Science Mission Directorate, for her expertise and insight. In the meantime, as we've been conducting that interview and making preparations for that, we've also been monitoring happenings on board the International Space Station. Want to go to these live pictures right now of the orbiting outpost, where you can see the Crew Dragon Freedom docked to the space-facing or zenith port on the Harmony module. It was moved on Sunday to make space for the incoming Cargo Dragon spacecraft that you see there live, also on the right-hand side of your screen. As we've been monitoring the space station, there's been some communication between Mission Control at Houston to the astronauts on board station. Typically right now, at this point, the astronauts on board the U.S. segment would be asleep. However, they have had some communication with them to, sounds like, troubleshoot some type of issue that was pressing enough that they needed to wake up one of the astronauts and have them work that through, though it does sound like from where we're hearing that the issue has been resolved. But again, notable that while this is their normal quiet period and sleep time for the astronauts on board station, that they did go ahead and get one of them on the comms to work through that issue. We'll work to see if we can bring you some more color and detail on what exactly was being worked out during this work, but just wanted to bring that to folks' attention if for some reason this, whatever the issue specifically was, does crop up again. Time now, T-minus 40 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. We are just about 2 minutes away from the point in which the SpaceX launch director is set to make the call on the start of propellant load for today's mission.
This is the launch director on countdown 1. MD has confirmed Dragon is go for propellant load and launch, and in EPROX 1.160, polling for propellant load and launch is complete. All teams have polled go. Stand by for abort instructions. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operator shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence and proceed with launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off and relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count.
And a good update from SpaceX Mission Control. Of course, they are running their countdown operations from the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center. They also have support from Hawthorne, California, where the SpaceX headquarters is located. Being that this is a NASA mission and one heading up to the International Space Station, of course, the Johnson Space Center in Houston, the Mission Control there also in the loop and keeping apprised of the launch activity here. Space Station getting ready to receive the Cargo Dragon spacecraft at the top of the Falcon 9 stack at about 10:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. It's about 15:15 UTC for our friends around the world. As we note quite often, the SpaceX folks do their readiness poll electronically, so while the roughly nominal time for them to take that poll comes up at about T-minus 38 minutes, they, as you just heard tonight, they can take that earlier if they feel like they're in a good position to proceed with fueling. So the fuel load process will begin at T-minus 35 minutes. And with that benchmark right around the corner, now is a good time to go ahead and walk you through the countdown timeline, let you know what's still on tap for the launch this evening as NASA and SpaceX prepare for this Dragon flight. We've just gone through the go ahead for the start of prop load. Again, that'll begin at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP1, or rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and
Thanks,
second
everyone, for the
stages.
start of propellant load.
Good call there. At the same time, at T-minus 35, they'll begin loading liquid oxygen, or LOX, on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes, they'll begin loading cryogenic helium on board the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. As a reminder for those who were not here earlier in our broadcast coverage, we did discuss the helium issue that cropped up during last night's Starlink 6-77 launch attempt. About 2.5 minutes before liftoff, SpaceX called a hold, and effectively a scrub of the mission, due to what they described at the time as a first stage helium issue, with some later context that came out during a media teleconference earlier today. They said in response to our question that it had to do with a ground side issue over at Space Launch Complex 40. SpaceX representative also noted that the issue was, again, on the ground systems side and is isolated to that pad and has no bearing on the launch here at pad 39A.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And with that call, prop load has now begun on the Falcon 9 rocket. Going back to our countdown timeline, cryogenic helium load will begin on the second stage a few minutes after it starts on the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 23 minutes, second stage kerosene loading concludes. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. We'll see that manifest as the so-called big vent at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. But this is when SpaceX is chilling the feed lines at the pad in preparation for second stage LOX load, which begins at about T-minus 16 minutes. Moving along, T-minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill down sequence gets underway. It's when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps on the Falcon 9 first stage. It helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. At T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence begin. It starts with the clamp arms just beneath the Dragon spacecraft opening up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, reclines about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff, at which point it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. T-minus 3 minutes is when the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute later, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. T-minus 45 seconds is when the SpaceX launch director will verify their go for launch. Engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff coming up at 9:29 p.m. Eastern. That is 02:29 UTC. T-minus 32 minutes, 20 seconds. Now T-minus 31 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. As fueling continues underway here at the pad, some of that additional hissing you're hearing is some of the venting as the RP-1 is beginning to flow on board the first and second stages of the rocket. And you can see that frost line beginning to solidify there just beneath the X in SpaceX on the left-hand side of the vehicle from this vantage point. It's the super cold densified liquid oxygen that is being loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Certainly appreciate the more than 5,300 of you who are joining with us live this evening. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could do us a favor and hit that like button for us. That allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we cruise on into the final half hour before the planned liftoff. Also want to thank a few folks for their support this evening. Our thanks to one of our wonderful channel members, Patty Chichil, who's been with us for now 4 months, who says, "Thank you, Spaceflight Now and mods and live chat peeps. So happy I found this channel." Appreciate the kind words, Patty, and we're glad you found us too. Our thanks as well to another wonderful channel member, Rick Donner, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that, Rick. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Rick in the live chat if you haven't already. We hope you stick around with channel membership. Also want to thank James Castile for a $10 super chat. Thank you, James, saying happy Monday to all. Patty Chichio with another super chat here, saying welcome everyone. Godspeed CRS 31. MW Photography, also $2 super chat, also wishing a Godspeed to this mission. And Monkey Tree Rob with a $2 super chat with just a little bit of support. Appreciate you, Monkey Tree. We're now at T-minus 29 minutes, 49 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 28 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. We've had a lot of great conversations this evening with the Deputy Chief Scientist of the International Space Station program, as well as with the Director of NASA's Biological and Physical Sciences Division. And in just a few minutes, we're going to be joined by our third and final live guest, Mr. Pat O'Neill with the ISS National Lab, to talk about some of the ISS-sponsored science that's going up on the CRS-31 mission. So stick around. We'll be back with more commentary on the other side, but in just a couple of minutes, we'll be joined live by Mr. Pat O'Neill. You're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the CRS-31 mission, the latest Dragon flight to the International Space Station. And welcome back to our live coverage of the Commercial Resupplies 31 or CRS-31 mission to the International Space Station. We're out here on the press lawn, joined once again by another very special live guest. This is Mr. Pat O'Neill. If you've watched our live coverage of really any Dragon mission that's gone up recently, you might recognize this gentleman to my left, who's of course with the ISS National Lab with their outreach program and division. Pat, always good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And so, you know, we teased a little bit when Crew 9 launched about some of the science and work that's going up on this mission. The mission is now here, so let's delve a little bit more directly into it. You know, we've talked a lot about the professional science that's been going up, but I want to actually start our conversation with some of the student science that's going up, since there's, I believe, 39 different student experiments that are launching the space station. Talk about how that type of, you know, experiment comes together. Like, you know, I don't imagine you have a giant, you know, cauldron at the ISS National Lab where you just pick out a name from a, you know, random high school. Like, how does that partnership come about, and what's some of the experiments that are going up from the students? Yeah,
so great question. This actually stems from the Student Spaceflight Experiments program, which has been a part of 18 different missions to the space station. So what this group does is they engage communities all over the United States and actually all over the world. So there's a couple of projects that are spanning beyond just North America as well. But it allows students the opportunity to not only think of a concept of what they want to do, but also engineer the payload. And it's going to be mixed sticks, so it's, you know, it's something where you're trying to find a way to make it fairly easy to engineer in a space-based environment. But again, we're able to send out 39 of these projects up this time around, and some of them are going to be focused a little bit more in plant biology. One of them that I just found out about the other day was there's going to be students that are sending up liquid IV. And they want to see how that's going to react in a space-based environment. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. Who's to say that maybe one day down the road you're going to need to have some more electrolytes or something like that for the astronauts on station. So those are some of the projects that are flying. We're excited about it. We're also excited about the fact that it is able to give them an idea about thinking outside of the box.
Thinking outside the box, you know, with liquid IV to worms. I mean, it's kind of an interesting gamut of things that's flying with the students.
Yeah, and typically speaking with this program, it does kind of run a full gamut, where sometimes there will be some life sciences, plant biology, there'll be some loose physical sciences. Again, it really allows for the students to tap into what it is that they want to send to station, so long as it's able to work in this mixed stick environment. And now here we are.
And, you know, pretty typically when we see an International Space Station mission launch, you know, we'll see something from, you know, our neighbors to the north here in Florida, Redwire Space up in Jacksonville. They're launching another pillbox adjacent experiment. Can you talk a little bit about what they're going to be doing with the pillbox and the other industry partner that they're working with?
Yeah, so actually there's a couple of industry partners that they're working with. Probably the one that is most recognizable will be Bristol-Myers Squibb. Bristol-Myers Squibb is no stranger to launching investigations to the space station. In the past, they have launched protein crystal growth investigations, and now they're going to be doing this with the pillbox, with the Redwire team. And hopefully the thought is that they can make a more effective therapeutic for consumers or patients here on Earth. But also on top of that too, they're working with another pharma company that is actually testing an active drug that could be focused towards rheumatoid arthritis. So I think that that's also an exciting development, because over the years we've seen a lot of fundamental research on biomedical research, but now you actually have active drug targets that are being tested to see how they react in space, if they might accelerate the pathway for us to learn something and then bring that back down to us here on Earth.
And just taking a quick look at the countdown clock, it's T-minus 20 minutes, 40 seconds and counting. Stephen, once the big vent happens in about 20 or so minutes, you can go ahead and bring that in the big box where we're talking right now. We'll just continue our conversation here. But, you know, you mentioned that there's, actually, you can see right now the big vent here. This is, for our viewers who are maybe not familiar, a sign that they are beginning the chill down sequence for the feed lines that are going to be allowing the second stage liquid oxygen load to begin to progress on the Falcon 9's second stage, which starts at T-minus 16 minutes. So a good visual indication that fueling is continuing on track this evening, proceeding towards a launch now in just 20 minutes exactly. So coming back to our conversation, Pat, and we'll let this go over our phases right now. Call for stage 2 RP1 load complete, so another good fueling milestone. You know, pharmaceutical science launching with Redwire. What are some of the other experiments that, you know, in particular that you've got your eye on with this particular flight of?
Yeah, so a lot of biomedical research, a lot of organoid research, and a lot of that organoid research is being funded by the National Science Foundation. So there's two projects that I'm thinking of right now. One of them is from University of California, San Diego, so UCSD. They also are no stranger to launching great organoid research to the station. And there's another group from Oregon State that is launching another organoid investigation. I believe theirs is focused more on organoids that are looking at cardiac issues, whereas UC San Diego is looking at more neurological issues.
And when the ISS National Lab, both looks to greenlight, partnership with various institutions, whether it's a commercial company, a research laboratory, and thinking about when they could fly to the space station. Obviously, part of that conversation is going to be, what are the astronauts looking at? What's their sort of suite on their plate? But do you also look to try to clump like or similar science together, and does that have any bearing on sort of what flies when, or is it more so driven by the readiness of the science to go up?
That's a great question. It's a little bit of all of the above. So basically, think of it as a game of like Tetris, where you have X amount of volume that can fit into a vehicle, and we're trying to find the right spaces to be able to fill that rocket up appropriately, while also being mindful of the astronaut crew time that's going to be needed to be able to support these investigations. One of the great things that we see about a lot of these CRS missions is a lot of the payloads are autonomous. So it's basically just being able to put it into a rack space, the astronaut flips a switch, and then the investigation takes off and goes from there. And that allows the astronauts to then focus on other investigations that might be a little bit more intensive on their perspective. So it really does run the full gamut. I mean, we like the ones that are very simplistic, but we also are mindful of the ones that have an awful lot of astronaut interaction too.
And, one of the last questions I'll ask before I let you go is, as the countdown clock still ticks behind us, we've asked this of our other guests, obviously a lot goes up with a Dragon, a lot can come down with the Dragon. Is there anything particular connected to the ISS National Lab that's going to be coming back once Dragon undocks in about a month?
So again, a lot of the biomedical research typically goes up and then comes right back down. One of the luxuries that we do have is if you're looking at something that's more of a material science or a physical science investigation, sometimes they can just stay on station for an extended period of time because they don't have to come back down immediately. So I think that that's what you're going to see with this. Is this launch will have a lot of the biomedical research, the Bristol Myers Squibbs, the National Science Foundation investigations. Those types of projects will be coming back down when this mission is completed. But then other ones will stay up there for 6, sometimes even longer than a year. I mean, it just depends on what the research team is looking for.
And one last tease into the future, as you're looking towards the next flight to the space station, what's going up and what's the next mission that you've kind of got like a little collective going up to the space station?
Well, I can tell you that the early part of 2025 is going to be very, very busy as far as a lot of R&D going to the space station. We're still trying to map out some of the projects that are going to be flying on both SpaceX CRS-32 as well as NG-22. But what I can tell you is both of them are going to be loaded, and there's going to be a lot of great science flying in early 2025.
Thank you so much. Pat O'Neill with the ISS National Lab. Always good to talk to you. And as you may have just heard as Pat was wrapping up his answer, stage 2 liquid oxygen load has started. Currently T-minus 16 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. So making a lot of good progress towards the launch of that very important science, experiments, and stuff from a lot of students from around the world heading up to the space station in just about a quarter of an hour. We're gonna have lots more commentary and coverage on the CRS-31 mission, so don't go anywhere. Launch is coming up in just less than 16 minutes. You're watching Spaceflight Now. Now currently T-minus 12 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Taking a look at our live chat here. Want to thank the now a little more than 10,000 of you who are joining with us tonight. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, allow some more folks to find their way in, as we are just 12 minutes away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket supporting the CRS-31 mission. Also see that another one of our moderators, Astro Joe, has popped on in tonight. Good to see you, Astro Joe. A number of folks have been asking in the live chat as well where this Falcon is going to be flying once it leaves the pad, and I appreciate those who have jumped in to answer that question. But for those who maybe have not seen it or want to see it in a more graphical sense, let's go ahead and give you the lowdown on this flight. Of course, the Falcon 9 rocket stationed at Historic Launch Complex 39A there at the Kennedy Space Center. Once it leaves the pad, it's going to be flying to catch up to the International Space Station in a northeasterly trajectory. So for folks that are in northeast Florida, in Georgia, in the Carolinas, and possibly even farther up north, weather permitting, you might get a good view of the Falcon 9 rocket as it begins its climb uphill. I've had some folks that have been in Washington, D.C. that have seen a Falcon 9 rocket launch if the sky is clear enough. So for all of our friends and viewers who are up and down the eastern seaboard, if you do catch a glimpse of the Falcon 9, you take a picture of it, tag us on X. We'd love to see it. Falcon 9 first stage booster that's supporting this mission B-1083, making its 5th flight. Going to be performing a boost back maneuver heading back here to the Sunshine State for a touchdown at Landing Zone 1 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It's coming a little less than 8 minutes after liftoff is when that booster should touch down at LZ1. A little bit different of a timeline for this mission, as the Dragon spacecraft is going to separate from the second stage, as we learned earlier today, 145 seconds prior than previous missions. SpaceX says they've learned enough and gathered enough data from flying Dragon as much as they have, that they feel like they can release the Dragon spacecraft from the Falcon 9's upper stage, again, 145 seconds earlier than they normally do. And that will allow them to have more time ahead of the second burn, the deorbit burn of the Falcon 9's upper stage following Dragon deployment. So a T plus 9 minutes and 25 seconds, almost mirroring where we are on the countdown timeline. But imagine where we are right now, but on the other side of liftoff is when Dragon will separate from the second stage. Then the nose cone opening sequence begins at T plus 10 minutes and 8 seconds. Now currently T-minus 8 minutes, 57 seconds and counting. We're less than 2 minutes away from the engine chill down sequence on the Falcon 9 first stage. It's a process of flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbopumps to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. SpaceX and NASA have been busy in the overnight hours. The Falcon 9 rocket was originally intended to be rolled out and brought upright on Saturday. That didn't end up happening until around 7 p.m. last night. And of course, since this is a cargo mission heading up to the International Space Station, and as we've been discussing throughout the evening, lots of biological, biomedical, cellular science heading on board, they need to do what's called a late cargo load. Here's some B-roll of what that late load process looks like as they bring some of those experiments that need to go onto the Falcon 9 rocket just as late as possible before the mission launches. The process has largely remained the same throughout the course of the Dragon flights. This particular mission, though, you're seeing the B-roll from, we believe, is probably around the time of either Crew 3 or Crew 4, just based off of the lack of names that are surrounding the NASA meatball. You see there on the right-hand side of the screen. Now T-minus 7 minutes, 4 seconds and counting. While we didn't hear the call there from SpaceX, the engine chill down sequence would be
Stage 1, RP1 load complete.
it's getting underway. As you just heard, Stage 1 RP1 load has wrapped up. That rocket-grade kerosene tank now topped off. About 3 minutes from now, they'll finish loading liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Before we go ahead and get to that point, I want to thank a few more folks for your support this evening. Our thanks to one of our wonderful channel members, Mel Roberts Harold, joining us with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Mel. He says, thanks to everyone at Spaceflight Now, the behind-the-scenes techs, the mods, the nice folks in the chat, and to me for keeping it interesting each time. Well, thanks for the kind words, Mel, and thanks for your support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now. Hope all is good in Chicagoland, if that's where you're joining us from tonight. Our thanks as well to Rick Donner for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you, Rick, and welcome aboard to our 5 newest channel members. Be sure to thank Rick in the live chat if you haven't already. Thanks as well to Jacoa RSA for a 14 ZAR super chat, and a very special message saying, getting married Saturday and seeing live launch. GBWY.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for strong back retract.
Good call for a strong back retract. We'll see.
Dragon is in configure for terminal count. Dragon is in terminal count and is on internal power.
Good calls from SpaceX. As you heard, the Dragon is now transitioned to internal power, as we'll soon see the clamp arms just beneath the Dragon trunk opening up.
Strong back lower has started.
Here we see the clamp arms beginning to move now. The transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stayed in that position until liftoff. Currently T-minus 3 minutes, 52 seconds and counting. In less than a minute, the first stage LOX tank will be full.
On countdown, LD polling for MD for final status check.
MD is go for launch.
Stage 1, locks load complete.
Good call from SpaceX there, as we're now about 30-ish seconds away from conclusion of fueling on this Falcon 9 rocket. Not sure if you can hear in the audio from our microphones out on the press lawn, but maybe hearing the NASA helicopter off in the distance, getting ready to take some aerial footage of this Falcon 9 when it lifts off.
Stage 2, locks load complete.
In less than 2 minutes. With that, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Want to quickly thank Richard for a $2 super chat, saying can't wait to see this.
Dragon is in auto idle. Gas launch closeouts has started.
Good call from SpaceX as they're purging the remaining liquid oxygen that may be remaining in the feed lines there. And with just about a minute to go before the liftoff, we're going to go ahead and keep our focus on the Falcon 9 rocket. We'll come back to the live chat on the other side. We'll just note one last super chat from that blonde space girl saying, let's go.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Dragon is in countdown.
And good calls. We're awaiting the SpaceX launch director's final go for launch.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
And with that, we are now just a little more than 30 seconds away from seeing the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket.
T-minus 30 seconds.
$20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the CRS-31 mission on the way to the International Space Station. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Max Q.
And some good calls from SpaceX.
Stage 2 engine chill.
As the CRS-31 mission now well underway. That call for engine chill to prepare the Merlin vacuum engine on the Falcon 9's second stage for ignition. We're coming up on a few different events in fairly rapid succession here. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff at about T plus 2 minutes and 19 seconds. That'll be followed a few seconds after that by stage separation. The Merlin vacuum engine will then kick on about 8 seconds thereafter. Following that, the boost back burn begins at T plus 2 minutes and 36 seconds, lasting a little less than a minute. We'll be off to the races. Some great work by our tracking team tonight. You see Miko.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 startup.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
A great shot of the boost back burn. This view coming to us from Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions. For those in Central Florida, and most specifically Florida's Space Coast, you may hear a sonic boom as the Falcon booster comes back through the atmosphere and makes its way to its landing at LZ-1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This boost back burn wrapping up in just a moment here.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
Now looking at an onboard camera view from the Falcon 9's second stage. Nearly 4 minutes into flight. The next event we are anticipating here is the start of the first stage entry burn. It's coming up at about T plus 6 minutes and 25 seconds.
Vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
A good call there that both the upper stage and the first stage are following the expected flight paths on this mission. Taking a live look now from our camera at the press site. You can see the glow of that Merlin vacuum engine from our perspective on the ground. Now 5 minutes into flight. We're now nearing T plus 6 minutes into this mission. We're just about 30 seconds or so away from the start of the first stage entry
Nominal
burn.
trajectory.
And as you just heard, the stages are following a nominal flight path. About 10 seconds away to the start of the entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn.
The call for the start of the entry burn, and there it goes.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
That call, the flight termination system on the Falcon 9's first stage, no longer needed at this point in the flight. You're seeing some of the lights of Florida's Space Coast starting to come into view here. Nice glowing view of our little neck of the woods, as seen from the Falcon 9's first stage onboard cameras. We're coming up on the start of the landing burn here, now less than 10 seconds.
Stage 1 transonic.
First stage traveling below the speed of sound. And again, for those who are here in Central Florida, be aware of that sonic boom that's coming up in the next minute.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing is confirmed. Stage 2 in terminal guidance.
And the first stage booster B-1083 safely back down at LZ-1, accompanied by the aforementioned sonic boom. The mission not quite over yet though, folks, so stick around as we're awaiting views coming from the second stage with the deployment of the Dragon spacecraft, which will be separating from the Falcon 9 upper stage in less than a minute.
Stage 2 shutdown.
A call for SECO 1 for second stage engine cutoff.
Nominal orbit insertion.
Good confirmation of orbit insertion. Now 9 minutes into flight. We're less than 30 seconds away from Dragon separation.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Seeing now live
Dragon separation confirmed.
live view inside the Dragon trunk as it got the call for separation. Hopefully we'll get some views back of Dragon as it begins to move away from the Falcon 9's upper stage. Now T plus 12 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. At this point, the Dragon's nose cone should have also opened. Taking a live look inside the headquarters for SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. We're seeing here are the two different control rooms. On the left is Mission Control Center Houston. On the right is the control center in Hawthorne, California. Of course, the Dragon spacecraft set to dock with the International Space Station at 10:15 a.m. Eastern. That's 15:15 UTC. As we just heard actually from a NASA commentator, they're actually still awaiting the nose cone deploy sequence. It's scheduled to happen at T plus 10 minutes and 8 seconds. May have just been that the Dragon went out of range to get that direct confirmation. That's why we're still hanging around for additional confirmation of nose cone deployment. The journey to the International Space Station, fairly quick, 13 hours. You're seeing the nose cone deployment sequence now. This is a graphic of the series of burns that the Dragon spacecraft will conduct on its journey to the International Space Station. First up is this phase burn to raise the perigee of the Dragon spacecraft. That boost burn brings it about 10 kilometers away from the orbit of the International Space Station. It's followed by an additional close elliptic burn and then the transfer burn. This transfer burn will raise Dragon just beneath the International Space Station, about 2.5 kilometers. tomorrow morning. Live coverage from NASA will pick up as Dragon makes that approach initiation that you just saw in that final graphic there before pulling back to this view of the two mission control centers. We do have word that the nose cone has locked into its intended position. And seeing some views from the Dragon spacecraft there as well.
Of collaboration, teamwork, and dedication in making missions like this possible and ensuring a continuous flow of science, technology, and resources. How have you witnessed this in your team's preparation for this mission and in recent missions?
Well, you know, operating a world-class orbiting laboratory requires extensive collaboration across all aspects of the ISS program. We have adapted to numerous items that were not as we originally planned, and we have the best team in the world, and really around the world, working solutions to every potential problem that could arise. Most recently, the outstanding international collaboration around the very busy traffic schedule to ISS and adjusting to that ever-changing launch and landing schedule while we prepared for the future by adding new capabilities to the ISS.
It certainly has been a busy time for the space station. It feels like it's been like that for quite some time now. And with this cargo mission, add that to the traffic dossier for this mission. Well, in addition to the cargo being delivered aboard it, another important aspect of this mission is showcasing the spacecraft's reboost capabilities. We touched upon it earlier in the broadcast of this importance and what it means to the International Space Station. But can you explain the significance of this ability and its importance for the space station?
Yeah, the ISS requires periodic boosts to maintain its orbit around the Earth. And normally these are completed by Progress, the Zvezda service module, or even Cygnus. It is important to us to continue to add capability to the ISS, and performing reboost with Dragon is an awesome addition to that capability. Plus, this allows the team to gather data that helps inform the design and operation eventually of the UST orbit vehicle.
In your time and in your career with the International Space Station, you focused on maintaining its health and its integrity. How do missions like this one help achieve those goals while also advancing the station's capabilities, like you just touched upon with some of the traffic coming to and fro, also the scientific research and the technological developments?
You know, ISS depends on a steady flow of supplies to safely maintain and continue on with its mission. This mission delivers examples of all those needs for the vehicle. Dragon will deliver food, spares, and of course the very important science that we conduct on board. Dragon also returns items to the ground. This allows us to refurbish hardware instead of building new copies, investigate designs and improve reliability for future spaceflight endeavors, and allows the scientific sample return to Earth that furthers research.
Well, we look forward to seeing all that this mission has to have in store, especially those reboost capabilities for this Dragon spacecraft. Bill Spetch, Operations Integration Manager of the International Space Station. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
And you're just hearing some remarks from Bill Spetch. As we're getting ready to close out our live coverage, you see the strong back at pad 39A has come back into the upright position. Before we go ahead and close things out with a look at our mission stats as they currently stand, I want to thank a few more folks for their support this evening. Our thanks to Kathy Fugger for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Appreciate that, Kathy, and welcome aboard to our newest channel member there. Also want to thank Curtis Smids for a $3 Canadian super chat, asking for a shout out to Leah Powell. Leah, hope you're doing well this evening. Nima N also with a $7 Canadian super chat. Thank you, Nima. Scott Thomas with a $1.50. Appreciate you, Scott. And back with a $3 super chat thereafter. Also want to thank, or welcome aboard, I should say, both V. Clark and John Beanie joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome to the two of you. Glad to have you with us, and we hope you continue to stick around with channel membership. Glad to have you on board. And with that, let's go ahead and take a look at our mission stats as they currently stand. Now that the Falcon 9 first stage booster B10 1083 has made a successful trip to the International Space Station. Go ahead and go through our mission stats in just a second here. This was the 5th launch of Booster 1083, which previously launched the Crew 8 mission as well as the 4 astronauts of Polaris Dawn. This was SpaceX's 389th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 104th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 334th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 106th orbital launch of 2024, including 2 Falcon Heavy flights. This was the 123rd orbital launch for SpaceX within the last 365 days. This was the 91st orbital launch from Pad 39A. This is also the 185th overall orbital launch from this particular pad as well. Moving on to our bar chart with this mission now in the books. You can see SpaceX at 106 on the year. Looking for a couple more Starlinks to add to that number later this week. This was the 46th landing at LZ-1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, marking the 57th land landing in Florida. 78th overall when you bring in California, and the 362nd overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, we did have launch of Japan's H3 rocket recently, so another global launch, but starting here in Florida. This was the 75th launch from Florida's Space Coast, the 113th from U.S. soil, the 123rd from a U.S. rocket company, and the 102nd around the globe. 6 orbital launch failures on the year. Here's where the pie chart currently stands. The U.S. with those 123 launches, China with 52, a little more than a quarter of the pie. Russia's launched now 12 times so far this year. Japan with 6, India and Iran with 3 apiece, the European Space Agency with 2, and North Korea with 1 launch attempt and 1 launch failure. With that, want to thank everyone who's helped make tonight's live launch coverage of CRS-31 a success. Congratulations, of course, to NASA and SpaceX for being the ones, of course, behind the mission itself. I want to thank Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images for providing support for tracking the rocket. Also want to thank our wonderful launch photographer team of Adam Bernstein and Michael Kane If you're not already following the fellas on X, you can find them at their handles you see here on your screen. Michael is at MD Kane Jr., Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. And remember to tag us in any photos or video you were able to capture of this flight as it made its ascension. I want to thank our moderators in the live chat. Thanks to Aussie Space Girl, to Astro Joe, and Callistia Lee. Broad thanks to our channel member community. Thanks as well to Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young for running the technical operations of the broadcast. And most importantly, thanks to you at home or wherever you're watching from around the world. I'll give the last word from the chat to Damian Williams with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Damian. Says awesome coverage as always. Thank you. Well, thank you, Damian, for supporting us. Be sure to head over to the launch schedule at spaceflightnow.com for the very latest on all the missions going up here and across the country. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.